On to round 3, a little bit backwards. I've actually done round 4 already, which I've yet to upload, but you can see already I got 12 under from Rolling Hills, on Rolling Hills from the 6th tee. You can see the guy I've got to worry about there, Tokyo Perfume, 17 under on the first, which is better than perfect, 17 under at Sands, which is perfect, just about. So big challenge here to finish in top spot. I've done okay. 12 under from the 6th tee at Rolling Hills is okay. I was one short, as you'll see on my other video, of making it a perfect round. I've not actually uploaded the other video yet, so it will be there shortly. So this is the worst pin position, but I've got a 3-yard wind in my face. That's good at this hole because it's quite tricky sometimes to stop it. If you land it on the green, it can easily go off the back. I've moved a bit to the right because it just gives me a bit more room. You don't get much margin for error if you're going right after the pin. So I've kind of aimed my marker over to the right a bit, which means I'm going to leave a more difficult putt, but I will be on the green and I will have a chance of a birdie. The other option is to go after the pin and possibly leave a bunker shot if you don't get it quite right. But you can see there, a 10-yard putt. It's not the best putt from that angle. I already knew that when I was playing the shot, but it is a bit of a double breaker, which, as I mentioned before, are actually easier to hold than ones with a single gradient. It's going to go left, it's going to come back to the right. Biggest thing about that, again, as I've said before, is it's going to, if you don't get it bang on the line, I've lined that up all wrong. That's actually quite useful. That's quite a good example. You can see that although I lined it up wrong, I can see that if I aim it right at the hole, the ball's actually, if the gradient's true all across the green, which isn't always the case, but it looks like it roughly is here. That's hopefully going to go in. The other thing I was going to say, you notice I didn't get that right on the line, but it has still gone in. That's because it is a double breaker. If that had been a single gradient, that would have missed, not catching it on the line like that, because I would have hit it softer than the guide suggested, therefore the break would have took more. However, when it's breaking both ways, yes, the break takes more, but it takes more from the right, and it subsequently takes more from the left. So the ball ends up going along pretty much the same line once it gets to the hole. Not a great start. It was quite a tricky start to this week's tour, to this round. Sorry. So anyway, the second hole, if I'm going to miss on any hole, it's usually this one. It's quite a tricky one. Again, if you've watched my video last week, I did quite well at making this green. That's really quite a difficult wind to get it anywhere close in. So you can see the pins, not too bad a position. The green slopes back to front a bit, and if you leave the ball in kind of ahead of the pin, if you go past the pin, it's downhill. Luckily the pin's at the back, so I'm probably going to leave myself an uphill putt if I do make the green. Anywhere to the left and right can be quite tricky, so ideally I want to leave this along the line of the pin, front to back, and I don't want to be over the left or over to the right. It's a draw shot for me around the trees. Depending on your stats, you can make this with a low shot if you don't have this much distance. It's worth trying a low shot which goes under those 2 trees which are protecting the green. That's pretty much bang on. It's within 5.6 yards, but you'll see I do get, that's actually not too bad. I was thinking I had more of a break right to left here. That's actually not a bad position to end up in at all. I was quite lucky there. What I was trying to do is to move it over a bit further and probably end up a bit shorter of the pin with an uphill putt, but I left myself quite an easy putt there, so quite grateful for that. On to the third. When I played this last week, I hit the tree to take the pace off it, ended up on the green. I believe that's what I'm going to try and do now. Yeah, I remember this. Right, this is an interesting one. I lined this up exactly as I wanted to be honest, and I hit it exactly as I wanted to. The result isn't quite what I wanted. Now, I've never watched this back yet, but I believe it's going to kind of basically find its way between 2 leaves or something. Let's watch. So it looks like it's headed straight for that leaf, and somehow it makes it through. It's basically found its way between a couple of those big leaves. Luckily, this isn't too tricky a chip. You can see it's going to kick off to the right, and it's going to land. It's going to pitch about 3 or 4 squares back from the pin, so you don't have to worry about the gradient before that, but you can see it's going to come back in a little bit. So yes, it's going to kick off to the right, but it is also going to come back in a bit. So for that reason, I've just aimed very slightly to the left of the hole, and you should see that's gone fairly straight in the middle of the hole. So got away with that one a bit, although I wouldn't have done anything different if I'd lined that up again. To be honest, there's no way you can, you can legislate for it going between a couple of leaves. Sometimes these things happen. So the fourth albatross chance, quite tricky with that right to left wind. This is all about getting the line right. Well, not all about that. You've got to get the distance right as well. It wants to pitch just in front of that bit of bunker that's sticking out at the front of the green there. If you go too far left, it can leave a really nasty putt with a big left to right break. So my aim here is to err on the side of going too far right than too far left, because I might go off to the right, so be it. I'd rather take that chance to really go after the pin and leave a putt that's holeable, because you can get a putt that's really, really tricky to put away if you go too far to the left, kind of 10-15 yards from the pin, or 10-15 feet from the pin. So I caught that just as I wanted. Let's see if my line's right. That's pretty good. Yeah, the distance is key there. If that had rolled 5 or 6 yards past, it would have been a really tricky putt. As it stands, it's quite tricky, but nowhere near what it could have been. So I'm fairly happy with that. I actually got this pin every time. This is my 4th attempt at stands. I've actually still got one in the bank, which you'll see later. I might need, but very unlikely. I'll better the round that I'm putting in here. So I've overdone the break a little bit. I'm going to hit it slightly under, very slightly, and that is going to go in. It's quite easy. It's not too bad a pin position that for the ball rolling over. There is one pin, which is over the other side of the green, which can be an absolute nightmare sometimes. But anyway, this hole actually in my last tour, Master Pro B, I hit it a bit too hard. I've tried to not do that on this occasion, but I think I'll do it again, but not actually off the back of the green, which I did last time. So I think last time I went about 261 in a 3-yard wind, so I dropped it off a good 6 or 7 yards. The idea is I want it to hit the fairway just to the right of that bunker. The fairway is going to kick over to the right a little bit, so it's quite easy to go too far right here if you don't take into account enough of the pitch of the ball. When it lands, it's gonna kick off to the right everywhere on that bit of fairway I'm aiming at. If the pin's right away to the left, you can draw this. This is definitely a straight shot for me, and you can see I got the line just about as I wanted. A bit too hard though. Luckily, not quite as too hard as the last time, so I have still got a putt, a tricky putt, but a putt all the same. So a downhill putt, a fair amount of break on it, which gets less as it gets closer to the hole. This is better than if it was breaking a small amount and that break was getting more as it got towards the hole. It's going to take more because the ball's not travelling as quickly. The faster the ball's travelling, the less the break's going to affect it. Golfstar's great, actually. The physics engine in it, there's a couple of little glitches from time to time, but it is really reliable most of the time. As far as, if you try and compare what would happen in the real world compared to what's happening within Golfstar. Obviously nobody's on the real golf course quaffing perfect drinks and using their putting guides, but in general, like things like the way the ball's going to react if you hit it a bit harder, where it'll bounce in certain conditions, and that sort of thing. It does do what you'd expect it to do if you think about it. Sometimes you get some surprises, but then if you think about it, well, if I was doing that in the real world, what would happen? It tends to tie in. So that was an eagle. I managed to catch that pretty much bang on the line. This is where I made my mistake last week. I went for a sky shot just out of the blue. I thought, let's just do it. And as I said at that point, usually when you try something different, you end up with egg on your face. So this week I don't try anything different. I'm going to go for a 5-wood power shot. I'm going to hit it slightly softer than full. The green is like in a bit of a dish, so if you hit it to the right, it'll kick it off to the left. If you hit it to the left, it'll kick off to the right. In this instance, I've gone over to the left, and I want the ball just to come into the right a bit and roll on, which it's done. That's not too bad a position to put from. Any further on, and you could end up with quite a heavy break. As you can see, the green's breaking over there to the top left. If you leave the ball over there, you can leave a really tricky putt here. As it stands, it's a double breaker, which I'm always quite happy about. Easier to line up and easy to catch it right, or easy to to hole basically. Got the line up okay, so it's just a case of adjusting and hitting it as close to the line as I can. Okay, so I think I've got that about right. Not bad at all. And we move on to the 7th. In my opinion, when you're playing this in the World Championship, the key holes are 5, 6 and 7. So there's 3 eagles. You can be 6 under from 3 holes if you get all 3 right. That can often be the difference between winning and losing. So this is the 3rd of those, that trilogy if you like. I always play a low shot here. I've seen all sorts of different shots played. It's always the way I've played it. I know that if I hit a full wood, it's going to end full forward with my stats at the minute. It's going to end up at the back of the green. I've brought it back a little bit because I don't want it right at the back of the green. I want it to be where the pin is, basically, for obvious reasons. So the ball's going to obviously pitch way short of the green, but with a low shot, it's going to run on. And we should see, if I've got my line right with the wind, it shouldn't be too far away. Obviously, you've got to think about that bunker I just pitched beside, so I couldn't have gone too much further left. But as you can see, I didn't want to in that wind. With a left to right wind, it could have been a bit more tricky. There's another one. I've left a downhill putt, but luckily it's short enough for it not to be a big problem. But you'll see how much more it breaks than a similar breaking putt, which happened to be uphill. So it's worth bearing that if you're using a guide. Bear that in mind before you use your guide. Sometimes you can just totally waste the guide by lining up all wrong, and you end up with a putt that's actually harder than if you hadn't used the guide in the first place, because the guide kind of puts thoughts into your head. So for downhill putts, it's sometimes better if you look at it and you think, oh, I'm not sure about this. It's sometimes better just to hit it without. You can hit it a bit harder than the guide suggests, which means it isn't going to break so much. You need to make that decision. So again, as we saw last week, this is a punch shot for me, not a low shot as I just selected. You'll see me change to a punch shot now. This is all about the distance, just getting the distance right. Too hard, and I'm going to be right at the back of the green with a longish putt. Wouldn't actually be too bad a place to be because that putt isn't too hard. The biggest consideration here is not leaving it short. Anything too short, there's a big bank there, and it can quite easily get caught up and not quite make the front of the green. So it's all about, you'll see me erring on the side of hitting it maybe a little bit harder than I had it lined up here, I think. When I eventually get around to hitting it. Again, when I'm playing, I'm taking as much time as needed in the tour. Absolutely no reason for me to rush it, other than boring everybody watching, I guess. I think I'm probably aiming to hit it around about 95, a little bit lower than that probably, as I'm watching it through. That looks about right. Yep, I decided on that. Nearly missed the perfect zone, but got it. So you can see it's, it was going quite a way back from the pin, but because it was a punch shot, it's got a very low trajectory. It's going to shoot on, and I got the distance just right to leave me a standard putt for birdie. So you would have seen at the start, my target for this round was 17 under. Now as it stands, this will put me on 15 under with a par 5 to come. So an eagle there would put me on 17 under. I didn't check the guy's points on screen before, but I've since seen, and they are good. He's got a good points total. So if we have a look at my points at the end, I can tell you exactly what I'll need on the last hole in order to... this putt here, sorry, just gibbering away, you'll notice I hit it full. The guide suggests I hit it quite a bit harder than that, but I dropped it down to a full short putter because you get 1 extra point. For me, hitting that at max, that's gave me 1 extra point. So when I was talking about points there and what I've got to do, that's the sort of thing can gain you a few extra points that can be the difference between winning or losing a round. Right, this one I actually got a right to left wind. You would have heard me mention last week I can only make the green here in a right to left wind. However, it's a little bit, if it had been slightly angled into me, I would have been a bit happier, and not quite as full right to left, because I know I can't hit it any further right than this tree, so I just can't. It's going to hit the tree. So I know from previous experience that where I want to hit it is going to leave it a little bit left of where I actually want it to be. So I was holding my breath a bit here. It's possible just to albatross this, but it is a real, it's got to be absolute deadly accurate. So we'll see how I manage that. If I'd gone full there, I would have just missed this path. Basically, I'm aiming to bounce it off this path, which I do. However, not hard enough. Now, actually, I probably could have hit that a little bit harder. Not full blast though again, but at the end of the day, it's left me short. So knowing this guy's points afterwards, essentially I need to put this in to get 18 under, which I think would be a record for me from the 5th tee. I know again that my points are just a little bit shy of his. So when I was mentioning about the competition in Master Pro A, that's what we've got to compete against. So basically, I'm flopping this. It's not going to go particularly high. I prefer a flop from that sort of range. Now, if you look, what I was aiming for there is to go up the hill and come back down in the hole. I've managed it before. Obviously, a lot of luck involved in getting that in. I put it pretty close, but not quite there. So particularly happy with that. In a lot of other people's groups, you'll see, I've talked before about how the groups work. Now, my group happens to have a certain range of players in it, but other people will see me in their group, and I'll probably be top in stands in most of them. But this guy's done, played a blinder. He's not just got 17 under, he's got 17 under with good points. Fine margins, a couple of holes. If I'd managed to get a nice approach, then I could have been top. Obviously, it's easy to say after the event. I've got one try left at it. I will have another go at it, but very unlikely I'll make 17 under again. I'll get 15, 16s quite regularly. 17's a bit of a rarity, so I was quite pleased to hit it. Typically in Master Pro A, there's somebody else that's gone one better and hit a 17 under with better points than me. But fairly pleased with the round anyway. It should be a good watch. I'll upload the rolling hills I was talking about earlier from the 6th tee. And thanks for watching this one. Comment, like, share, as always, much appreciated. Subscriptions, always accepted. I'll see you next time.